Welcome to this edition of Open World Chat. We're delighted to have Margot Harrison, who is a film critic and editor for the Burlington Weekly 7 Days. Margot, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we are looking forward to getting into and dissecting and deconstructing this concept of the strong female character, the strong woman character, which is a phrase that we've all heard in film and television for decades. And as the years go on, it always seems to mean something a little different, usually something defined by writers who are men. You heard it connected to characters in television like, Emma Peel back in the 60s. Then you hear that term used a lot with characters. Again, I'm going to stick with TV because it happens to be in my head at the moment, like Lindsay Wagner's Bionic Woman. And then, the whole approach changes when you start getting to characters like Ripley from Alien and, and on we go. Is this one of those Hollywood tropes?
Definitely. I noticed that there actually is a Wikipedia entry for strong female character that kind of brings together some of the controversy that there's been around this term, including it seems like it's often something that people are critiquing, that women critics are saying, it's great to try to have these strong women characters, but look at these problems that have been caused, or maybe people have too narrow an idea of it. So I think it's often, there's a lot of debate about this.
So as a critic who has been obviously following generally the genre from sort of an outside perspective, with this trope, do you see the same stereotypes showing up over and over again, or does it change from one decade to the next? Do you see patterns? Do you see sort of a pendulum back and forth? What have you observed?
Definitely it changes from decade to decade. And I think what most people agree on is that there was a time in the golden age of Hollywood, maybe 30s, 40s, when there were a lot of strong women characters in what they called back then women's pictures. These were sort of like dramas, and we're talking about people like Barbara Stanwyck in noir movies, Bette Davis, Joan Crawford. These women really commanded the screen, and the stories were all about them. The male characters were sort of relegated to the role of love interests in these movies. So women characters were really important back then, and were allowed to have a lot of complexity. They could be villainous as well as heroic. But around the late 60s and 70s, in what a lot of critics think of as the golden age of cinema generally, and especially auteur cinema, movies became a lot more male-dominated. And I mean, women directors were never a thing back in the golden age of Hollywood, but in the 70s, the movies themselves became more about men. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Easy Rider is basically all guys. And that was sort of the ethos of the time. You do have some good female characters, but it doesn't really change, I think, until, well, people would argue maybe around with Alien, and the character of Ripley being a very strong character who is kind of iconic. And interestingly, she was originally written as a man, but director Ridley Scott decided it would be more interesting to have a woman in this position.
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up, because one of my observations for the strong female character, as it seems to be currently understood, is basically you write the script for a guy and you stick a woman in the role, and then you've got a strong female character. So it's interesting that that's real for Aliens.
Yeah, I found a whole Vanity Fair article where there's a whole list of movies that were originally written for a male character, and then it was turned into a female character, and surprise, surprise, it was a complex, strong female character, because apparently a lot of screenwriters write more complexity in their male characters, which is kind of a sad testament to how things are in Hollywood. But it's nice that these characters got to be female characters.
How much do you think that is because the writers tend to be male, so they don't seem to understand how to write for female characters as well? Or do you see that?
I think that that definitely plays a role. I mean, that's changing gradually, and we're definitely seeing more female screenwriters. I think tropes also play a role. Like even when it is a woman writing, sometimes she'll get pulled in by these tropes and expectations, and studio notes probably play a big role too. Like the executives saying, we want this character to, be softer because it's a woman character. I mean, I noticed interesting things like the movie Salt, which is an action movie starring Angelina Jolie, originally was planned as a Tom Cruise vehicle about a man. And in that version of it, he had children. But when they changed it to a woman, they got rid of the children because you can't have a woman action hero who also has kids at home. That makes her soft, and action heroes can't be soft. So you see that there really is a double standard, even in a fairly recent movie.
That's interesting, which immediately makes me think of the animated movie, The Incredibles, because that seems to be able to break that trope. She's a mom and she's a person who's female and feminine, but at the same time, she's also a strong character.
But that's a light and funny movie too.
It is, yes.
So, I mean, it's safe to play with that stuff. I'm wondering, even going back to the 40s that you were talking about, but really every stage along the way where this idea gets expanded, even if it gets a little crude, that there always does seem to be a cap, thus far and no further. And I think, the Salt kind of isn't exactly what I mean by that, but it's still, it sort of alludes to it. It's like, okay, we'll make you strong and tough, but we're going to dial back on this original idea because that crosses the cap. I'm wondering how that's changed and how that does change, and if we're ever going to get rid of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the issue of children and whether a woman character can be shown as having children, we have now had movies that are like The Female Death Wish or The Female Taken. Like there was this movie Peppermint where Jennifer Garner played a woman whose family was killed, and then she kicks a lot of ass to avenge them. But I have a feeling that there's still a resistance to showing a woman who has children that she should be at home taking care of, doing all this action stuff. There's a resistance to that.
Yeah, that was. I noticed that you just used the word should.
Right. I don't believe that, but I think a lot of people still do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that plays a big part, especially probably with the studios.
Yeah, because there are audience members who would probably react negatively to that. Like, why isn't she taking care of her kids? Who's with the kids?
Yep.
It's definitely disappointing you bring up such a recent movie too. Like to think we're doing a little better, but that's sort of.
Yeah. I mean, it's great that we finally had a couple of huge vehicles for woman superheroes. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the Wonder Woman movies and Captain Marvel over on the Marvel side. And I think it's great that we have those, but it's amazing that it took this long for it to happen. And I think it really was because people were worried that no one would buy tickets to see a woman superhero.
That's an interesting point too, because with Marvel, you had a change of creative control. You had basically the person who ran the entire Marvel operation, including the comics, Ike Perlmutter, who was, famously impossible to find. He was like this mythical being. There weren't even photographs of him, and there had been, decades between public photographs until he started popping up at Donald Trump fundraisers at Mar-a-Lago. It's like, oh, look, we caught him. But he was famously eccentric, but also very famously, we will not have a women lead in any of our movies. He was also, we will not ever have a non-white male lead at all, period, because he was absolutely flat out. Nobody will go see those. And then you had the change. They go to Disney. Kevin Feige kind of goes around his back and gets sole control of the films. And you see it start changing very, very quickly, which makes me wonder how much of this is such a generational thing. You hit walls. I mean, maybe we're at a wall now that's not going to fall away, not just until more women are making these movies, but until the men who are get to be a different generation.
Maybe. I mean, I think there's still a lot of resistance. I mean, there's still a lot of fear that women will go see a movie that is about a man, but not vice versa. I don't really know if I hope that's changing generationally, but I know that in the book world, every time there's a discussion about this, there are still a lot of men who say, no, I would not read a book by a woman, or that's just not something that really interests me. Whereas women are all reading books by men, or, both. So I don't know, but it's true that, I mean, the Hunger Games movies did really well. That's a female-led franchise. And I know that when I was sitting in the theater getting ready to watch them, there was like a little boy who was telling his mother or father all about the books. So clearly he'd been reading them. He was invested in this franchise, even though there was a female lead. And I did find that encouraging.
Yeah. Speaking as a mother of two who are now in their early 20s, I do seem to see a generational shift in that attitude. My son, as far into geek world as one can possibly get. He's an AI engineer. Right? And for him, there wasn't even a thought. It's just, oh, this is a cool movie. I'm going to go see it.
Maybe that's just good parenting.
Well, maybe.
Pat yourself on the back.
But he's a pretty independent kid, so who knows?
That's an encouraging sign.
Yeah. I see, he and his friends will go see whatever as long as it seems like it's a good movie, and especially if it's a geeky enough movie, it has to at least have, either superheroes or things that blow up a lot or whatever, but they don't seem to care whether or not it's a female-led or male-led movie, so hopefully.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm thinking of the term chick flick. When does that end up in the dustbin of history?
Well, the thing about the so-called chick flicks is that they got cut out of theaters completely. I mean, they still exist, but only on streaming, or practically only. When I started reviewing movies in 2007, you could still see romantic comedies getting released almost every week with female leads. And now, the theaters are dominated by blockbusters and franchise movies, and the romantic comedies are on Netflix. So the actual thing still exists, but hopefully people will are not calling them chick flicks anymore.
So let's see, out of the movies that you've seen recently, are there any that seem to be more of a seed toward a future where strong female characters are more well-rounded? I mean, we've had the superhero females, as leads, etc., but are they still a little bit one-dimensional? Do you see anything that's looking like we're going to have more complexity and more real characters?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, there are things like The Old Guard, which technically is a superhero movie. It's a Netflix thing, I think, but with Charlize Theron playing a superhero who is she's immortal and she's been through so much and she's just jaded and weary and resigned. And that was an interesting character, I thought. The point of the movie, it wasn't like, oh wow, a female superhero. It was more like, what is it like to have to live so long and fight all these bad guys and just to have to try to rediscover your mojo again. And then she was contrasted with a younger woman who also had superpowers. There were also, superpowered men in the movie. So it's not like it was all female, but the main dynamic was between these two women. And that I thought was really great, just as a sign for the future.
Nice. Does it pass the Bechdel test?
I would say so, yes. Yeah, these women definitely talked about many different subjects.
Yeah. And they had names.
They did, yes. I mean, it wasn't my favorite movie of the year, but I like where things are going with that.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch as a big, genre nut. Enough of a nut that, I wanted to be involved in a podcast about it, right? But how the horror genre, how you start seeing so many, just the genre in general is really having a heyday. But so many of the new horror filmmakers are women. And there is a place that needed some serious improvement in the way women are represented. And I don't know if you follow much in that genre, but it's been an extraordinary thing to watch.
I'm a big horror fan. And it's interesting because, like horror movies have always been criticized for being sort of exploitive, and especially slashers. And that's certainly true, treating female characters in unsavory ways. But at the same time, there's this tradition of the final girl where it's always a woman who survives to the end of the movie. I mean, you could say that of Ripley in Alien, Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. So in a way, weirdly, those were some of the only movies that had female leads during that period when there weren't a lot of them. So I think it's great that women directors are getting involved in this now. And I'm trying to think of a good example, because I may not have seen a whole lot of them, but also, of course, there are some great roles for women in horror, like Toni Collette in Hereditary does an amazing acting job. Definitely a complex character, or Florence Pugh in Midsommar. Those are two of my favorite horror movies from the past few years, so I'm a little bit biased.
Yeah, I like that it sort of has, at least in those two, they kind of left out that whole trope of the woman in high heels running away from the bad guy, tripping, dropping her car keys. It's like that had to be just copied and pasted from one script to another for about a decade. And it was nice to not see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're getting away from that a little bit, which is definitely good.
Yeah.
And, you can have characters who are human and have flaws without being incompetent or doing things that a regular person just wouldn't do, like going down to that dark basement where there's something bad lurking.
Right.
Does it help in that genre? I mean, does it create more opportunities? As the idea of victimhood is there, and in so many movies, the woman being the victim. But in horror, everybody's a victim. Right? You almost skip that whole problem entirely, or does that ring true?
Yeah, I mean, horror is kind of, I think it's, in a way, it's a nihilistic genre because, it doesn't present a rosy view of the world at all. Usually, even the person who escapes at the end, often there's a teaser at the end, or, a sort of a little scene where the monster pops up again, like at the end of Nightmare on Elm Street or something. So you have this idea that the evil just repeats itself over and over. So I think horror is a sort of an exploration of all human beings as victims, and it requires you to empathize with the victims, whether they're male or female. And often horror can be a way to show more vulnerability in male characters as well.
Yeah, that's true. Usually in any other genre, you see the men almost exclusively being, cold, hard, strong, something, but it's never vulnerable. And that seems to be the only genre that really allows for that, which is interesting.
It requires it, I would say.
Yep.
Because, whoever the cold, hard action hero character is, they have to get killed off early in the movie so that they can rescue everybody else. In a horror movie, that is.
Yeah.
It seems like as more women get involved too, and this should be applied to really every category. Horror is becoming more sophisticated. It's not just same old stuff with different characters. I mean, I think of a movie like The Babadook, and I cannot remember the director's name. I cannot remember her name.
Kennedy, I think.
I don't know. We'll go with that. But I mean, that engaged it when all was said and done with the supernatural, terror in a really unique way. That end was, I don't know what to compare it to in terms of how the evil in the end is dealt with. Yeah,
it was controversial, but it really worked for me. And I think that's a good example of a character. I mean, the central female character in that is allowed to have so many shadings. I mean, she is allowed sometimes to have even negative feelings toward her child and just frustration with him, and grief and all kinds of other emotions.
Yeah. That's huge. You never, ever, ever unless it's like Mommy Dearest, right? Where it's exploring a woman as an evil human being. You're never allowed to see a woman who doesn't feel like their child is, the most perfect entity in the existence and in all of history. And so that is actually very interesting.
Yeah, it's nice to see more of these shadings, because I think traditionally people have seen a strong female character as somebody who is flawless, a superhero, an action hero, someone who just couldn't be an anti-hero, couldn't have human shadings. And that was a problem, because it produced a lot of boring characters, at least from my point of view.
Yeah. And if you go way back to, say, the Katharine Hepburn era, she could have flaws, but the flaws were basically that she was too independent.
Right.
So she made up for it in the end by falling for, whichever guy she was supposed to be falling for.
Right. And and that was another trope. The headstrong woman who had to learn that it was still important to get married and stuff like that.
Right.
That one pops up a lot in science fiction too, about that was so often, 60s, 70s science fiction's version of trying to speak to women was the, being on the bridge, but also you're going to leave to make a family someday. So,
Right. Yeah. And I have to say, two of my favorite strong female characters from the past 20 years or so were on Battlestar Galactica, the new version. I like the fact that there are two of them, and one of them was originally a male character who was turned into a female character. And that's pretty clear. She's Starbuck. She acts in a lot of stereotypically male ways, but she's still a good character, I think, and well acted. But what I really like is that there's also this character of Laura Roslin, the president, who is flawed in so many ways. I mean, she is a politician and she has to make so many compromises. She's always trying to do the right thing, but not always with success. So just seeing a woman in that position, and she's middle-aged, having a major role on a sci-fi show, that to me meant a lot. I really liked that.
Yep, that's huge. Between her and Janeway in Star Trek Voyager, those, I think, are really the only two, unless you go back to, say, Lost in Space, right, where you've got the mom. But she was clearly relegated to the role of a mom, whereas, in this case, these two are both in leading positions and they're lead actors and, they're doing interesting things, and it's not all around being a mom.
Right.
I heard a cat.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's my cat. She demands attention sometimes.
As do all good cats. As do all people. As everybody who doesn't want attention sometimes. So dare I pull out the geekiest question of all? The geekiest top potential line of conversation of all. I am interested in the idea of comparing and contrasting, since it's a multi-generational franchise, the quote-unquote strong women characters in the Star Wars franchise. You've got, over the years, you've got Leia, then you've got Padme, then you've got Jyn in, the little in-between one there. Why can't I think of its name? Rogue One. Oh, okay. Right. Jyn from Rogue One. And then Rey in the most recent trilogy, such as it was.
Wow. Yeah. I grew up with Princess Leia, so she was pretty huge for me as a kid. She had spunk, she had spirit. So yeah, that when I was 8, that was like the definition of a strong female character. And it's hard because, having seen the later movies as an adult, I don't think I have the same connection with them. And I definitely see that Rey is allowed to have complexities that, Princess Leia didn't really have. But I personally don't connect as much with her in that particular performance. But I think it's great that, she's there and she's allowed to be a Jedi and she's got action figures. That's definitely progress.
Yes.
Yeah, Leia definitely seemed to be one of these characters like, okay, you can be tough, but, there's a cap. thus far.
You gotta wear the white dress.
Mhm.
Right.
You don't get to be the Jedi.
Yeah.
And
Even though she was a Jedi.
Right. Right. Well, did that become a thing in the most recent trilogy?
Yeah, only to a point, but yeah, she was allowed to have a little of that going on. Well,
Right.
It was alluded to, but it wasn't really a primary driver of the character, even in the final episode.
Well, we saw her flying through space and doing her little force thing to stay
Right.
alive, and so it was more than alluded to, but still, it was that was tough for them, I think, because they wanted to respect what had passed, in the sense that she wasn't the one who ran off to be Jedi Master. She was, General Organa.
Yeah. I mean, I have not seen the last movie in the final trilogy, so I actually don't know where Rey's arc ended up, but I will soon enough.
I saw the last movie, and I'm not sure I knew where it ended up either. So,
Agreed.
Not a fan. All right, jumping forward. What about Padme? Did you watch those movies? Did you watch the prequel trilogy?
I saw the second two. I think I avoided the Phantom Menace, and yeah, I was just not feeling Padme. I'm not sure. I think they tried to make her a strong character, I guess. That there's no it's not working for me generally.
That might be about the best summary. She was, but she also didn't really exist. Like, she was there, but she wasn't really there. Most of the movie revolved around other things, and then she'd kind of make an appearance that seemed kind of wedged in, and then she was gone again, and other things were happening. And
well, did she have any agency at all? Leia had agency, and
No.
certainly Jyn in Rogue One had zero agency. That whole movie was about her walking through it and, the things that happened to her and what people did around her. So that seems like a big backslide there, because Padme seemed the same way. I mean, stuff just happened to her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she had this whole identity as a politician, but the thing she's most famous for is being the mother of Luke and Leia. So ultimately it seemed like that subsumed everything else, and dying, of course.
Right.
Dying of a broken heart, no less.
Yes. Speaking of tropes. Yes. That basically was her cap, if you think about it. I mean, she was this supposedly independent human being who was, a politician, who was a ruler, who was a leader, and yet, in the end, it all came down to the love of a man. Right. Bring us right back to Katharine Hepburn. Right.
Yeah. I still prefer the fanfic version of the prequels that I wrote when I was 15 years old. She was a stronger character in that version.
Fanfic gets a lot of clicks,
Oh, you have no
That's
idea.
Right. That's right. Well, it only exists like typed on a manual typewriter on onion skin paper.
Oh, man.
That was a long time ago.
Even better. It's classic it's legacy fanfic then. So.
That's right. I think I entered in a Bantha Tracks contest, which was the Star Wars fan club at the time.
Nice.
Never heard back.
Well, that's terrible. Well, you can start your own now.
Right.
Even steal the name, right?
All right. So, of all of the movies that you have seen with a strong female character, if you had to tell everybody listening to this, you've got to see this one movie to understand what a strong female character really should be, or even TV show, whatever. What would you recommend?
Oh, I'm not sure. That would be a tough one, because I feel like you would need to do it by genre.
Mm-hmm.
I think the characters that I've connected the most with were not really genre characters. They were more sort of like just straight drama characters, or in the indie movies. But there have definitely been characters over the years, like Dana Scully in the X-Files. She was really important for me, just in terms of having shadings as well as being smart and, strong. I think, in detective fiction, we've seen some good characters. Wow, it's really hard for me to think of a single one that I would pick out as exemplary but maybe that's kind of the point. I don't know, that we need to have an array of different characters who allow us to sort of explore different aspects. I mean, I really personally like anti-hero characters who actually do actively bad things at times. And I don't know if we've ever had a female character who was like Walter White in Breaking Bad, like who was allowed to go quite that far. I would love to see that though, if that happened. But I think we're kind of edging a little bit closer to that.
I wonder, science fiction defines itself as so progressive, forward thinking. And yet, it's always been so dominated by fanboys, often a generation behind. They really want to pickle what they do. They don't want to change. So you think, is science fiction going to be the last genre to get caught up with where things should be?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean, I think in terms of written science fiction, in terms of literature, it's actually totally caught up. I mean, I'm not an expert. I don't read that much science fiction, but the impression I'm getting is that there are a lot of strong female characters and characters who defy the boundaries of gender altogether. And there's been some backlash to that, but it's still going strong, having these very interesting characters who are not all white males. Mm-hmm. So
how much of that's coming from the women writers, which, you see at stuff like the Hugo Awards where there's almost a schism that's almost down gender lines. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. So there's that backlash. But then I guess you look at what's being made into movies and it's a much smaller, you have something like Arrival, which is based on a short story by a man, but has a very strong female character in it. That was a good movie. Or Annihilation, another case of a novel by a man with some very, very good female characters. I think all the central characters are female. And that also, as a movie, it has some issues, but it's it's an almost all female cast. I mean, how often do you see that in a movie that is kind of sci-fi horror?
I don't know if you would have the answer to this. Are you seeing in the box office that there is a reduction in the turnout for movies that have strong female characters, or are we seeing that isn't really happening despite the studio's fears?
That, I don't know. I mean, everybody cites Wonder Woman. Like they were really afraid that would flop, and it didn't. It was a huge hit. It's hard to say what. And Captain Marvel, I think, also did really well. So those movies may be kind of a watershed. I think you just never know. I mean, Annihilation, for instance, did not do well, but that could be for all kinds of other reasons too. It was a very niche sort of thing, very, very cerebral. Whereas if you put a woman in a big superhero franchise, it seems that people will continue to show up. The girl with the dragon tattoo movies that's an example of something that did really well. Although I think it's kind of controversial. Is Lisbeth Salander really a strong female character? I wasn't crazy about her, but certainly you could, she was a main character who, did some action stuff. So there's that.
Right.
And those did well. I mean, you see a lot. Oh, sorry. My minx is being talkative.
That's got stuff to say. I respect that.
It's the second Zoom meeting I've done today. So he's not used to my being preoccupied this way. Sorry about that.
If I were actually doing this from home, mine would be getting up on the desk and grabbing my hand, but our internet went out, so I'm someplace else. You're paying attention to something else here. Come this way.
Yeah, you're great that way.
Yeah.
Well, have we talked your ear off or made you talk our ears getting talked?
Yeah. Is there something you wanted to cover that we haven't covered?
I was thinking, like, when I got the topic for this and I was trying to think back over the strong female characters that I have liked during my life, I noticed that a lot of them are villains. When I was younger, there often weren't that many great female characters. So I would home in on the villains. For instance, in the miniseries V back in the 80s, my sister and I both loved, like, the main alien, Diana, who was like a lizard in a human suit. And she was just so deliciously in control of everything and evil. And we really enjoyed that. So I think that's one, strong female characters can also be villains. And recently there's been sort of this move to reclaim them with things like the movie Maleficent, where it's like the evil fairy godmother, the evil fairy in Sleeping Beauty becomes the heroine. I wasn't crazy about that, but I think I like that movement, that we can give these villains shadings as well. So that's something that I've always kind of enjoyed,
Mm-hmm.
that can be the villainy can be a source of strength as well.
Yeah.
Well, villains are often villains because they break the rules, right? So there's an appeal to breaking the rules.
They're also fun characters to play if you're acting.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get to use in real life.
Oh, they're so often the best characters.
Right. Have you seen the Jessica Jones? I think that was only streaming, right? That was Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked that. That was good. And it was interesting because she was a superhero. She was strong, but she also was dealing with trauma. And that is, in a kind of pretty realistic way. So it was really nice to see that combination. I mean, I have to make a confession. I'm not really a superhero or a comics person. Like, the only reason that I see these movies is that I have to review them.
You've done a very fair job with that. You can generally tell the reviewers that really, really don't like this stuff at all, because, they beat the hell out of it. But you've always been extremely fair, extremely reasonable. I appreciate that as a absolutely hopeless geek.
No, I'm a geek too. It's just I'm more on the sci-fi horror side of the equation. But yeah, I mean, it's like a world that I've sort of had to immerse myself into a little bit, to a degree. But it really makes me happy to see superheroes getting more diverse and getting more interesting. And, they can be different types of characters and not necessarily heroic, which probably was always true in comics. But I think in the movies, it used to be more homogeneous.
It certainly hasn't always been true in the comics. Well, and this year on television, anyways, we're getting our first, we're getting a teenage Pakistani American Muslim superhero. So,
is that Ms. Marvel?
Ms. Marvel.
Yes, my daughter is particularly excited about Ms. Marvel because she has come of age in this era where all of this discussion is happening. I mean, when she first started using the internet, really, that's when Gamergate happened.
Oh, wow.
So, right. That was her indoctrination into the way women are treated in the world. And she's like, yeah, no, I'm not having that. That seems to be true with her whole generation. And so it's very interesting. She's thrilled to have these characters that are strong female characters who aren't typical white, timid, and fitting into a very specific mold of what a female is supposed to be. So,
right.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the ingenue is what I get so tired of.
Yes.
We don't need any more white ingenues, Thank you so much. This was a great discussion. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about this.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. Open World Chat's theme music is by Chris Piatek.